It's not TV, it's HBO.
It's not TV, it's HBO.
Hope, positivity, and optimism.
Hope, positivity, and optimism.
Joseph Jaffe is not famous.
Joseph Jaffe is not famous. No.
Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. This is me, comedian George Wallace, the new Mr. Vegas. I'm here with you tonight. I'm famous. But let me tell you something. Your host tonight, Joseph Jaffe, he's not famous. He's not famous at all. But that's all we can do for you tonight. That's the best we can do. You know, Joseph is like Jon Stewart wannabe. He's like a Howard Stern wannabe. He is not famous, but he's your host, okay? Maybe he'll do good tonight. This is what you paid for. This is what you get. So, ladies and gentlemen, maybe you want to show him some love. Please welcome the not-so-famous Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Make some noise. Make some...
A spring in your step. There is a twinkle in your eye.
I can throw a rhyme down for you real quick. Yes, they call me Thrill. They say that I'm the man. You disagree, how could you? Let me make you understand.
Should we bring her on the show? Can anybody find me? And there she is.
Fresh as some bread. Pour right from the oven. When you feel rejected, get some my good loving.
Take on me.
She looks wonderful. Mom looks amazing.
Somebody to. Okay, Mom, bugger off now. I've got to show it to you. Love.
Like that?
Joseph Jaffe, ladies and gentlemen.
You just made the new intro of the show. Look, it is not often that we actually get this show sponsored or dedicated to anyone. We sit here in the basement of our Wayne's World-esque reality with our face for radio, and sometimes people pay attention, but today we don't have a sponsor, but we do dedicate the show to not only one but two people. We're dedicating this to Catie and Natalie, and if you don't know who either is, you will after this episode. Well, you saw Natalie is actually my mom, and she was all over the intro of the show. You saw a photo of her. She passed away in January of 2023. She actually came up with HPO, Hope, Positivity, and Optimism. That's what I called the show when I started. I said, this is about hope, positivity, and optimism. And if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. She shortened it to HBO. And then I was like, wait a second, I've got myself a tagline. It's not TV, it's HBO. And so that little introduction comes to you courtesy of the same continent that I come from, Africa. It's not TV, it's HBO. And as far as Catie is concerned, well, I'll give you a little bit of a clue. She's in this photo, and she's not Kevin O'Brien. So who is Catie? We will find out, and you will be richer for finding out who she is and what she contributed to this world, and what she continues to contribute to this world. Now, if you like the show, I ask you, I implore you, I request from you, hell, I beg you, please subscribe to me or to the show or to the show's channel. Just go to bit.ly/subscribe to the show. I will not stop until I drop. I will not stop until 8 billion people are subscribing to the show. And I can tell you that I'm close. I'm about 7.9999999, but I'm on the path. I'm on the path. And so your subscription means everything to me. Now, I'm going to just kind of fast forward through all of the other housekeeping that we normally do, because I really want to focus today's show on Kevin, on Catie, and I think on things that matter, which is why today's soliloquy is called Your Last Day. Now, I will tell you that I've been ruminating on a variety of different versions of that statement. In fact, I said you should live every single day as if it was your only day, as if it was your last day. And then I thought to myself, I've riffed a little bit more. What if you lived every day like it was your best day? Can you remember your best day? Do you recall your best day? Are your best years ahead of you or behind you? Some people don't get that opportunity. They don't get that luxury to determine if, in fact, their best days are ahead of them or behind them. But what if it was behind you and you didn't even know it? There's so many ways to kind of slice and dice this, but I want to focus on this idea of what if today was your last day? What if today was my last day? How would I spend it? What would I do? What would I do differently? What would I do the same? Would I basically say to Kevin, look, Kevin, it's my last day. Sorry about it. I got better things to do than hang out with you. I don't think so. I think if today were my last day, I'd be spending it with you watching, but certainly I'd be spending it with Kevin as well. You know, part of the thing is that when we realize that our time is up or our time is coming to an end, there are so many things that we wish we would have done. There's so many things we would have wanted to have done, and there's just no time. There really is never time. We could look at it two ways. One is make the time now while you have the time, and the other is resign yourself in a good way to the fact that there never will be enough time. But that shouldn't debilitate you. It shouldn't hamstring you. It should just empower you to say, look, I'm going to make the most of the time that I have. I'm going to play the hand that I was dealt and do my best to leave behind a legacy, some kind of continuity, make a difference in the small amount of time that I had. So it's kind of moot. It's maybe, I don't know, it's not much of a party game, I suppose. Probably make people depressed to kind of say, what would you do with your last minute, your last 5 minutes, your last hour, your last day? What would your last meal be? Don't worry about it. No one is on death row. Actually, we're all on death row, so to speak. The question is just when we're going to get that stay of execution. Why am I smiling? I'm smiling because as I come to terms and as I embrace the finality and the mortality of our lives, instead of pushing me down, it actually brings me up. It allows me to make the most of my time, to live every day like it was my only day, like it was my last day. And whilst I might not be able to cram everything into that final day, I would make sure that I did at least one thing that mattered. And that one thing right now is spending time with Kevin O'Brien. Now, I like to, I'm a bit impish. So normally I go to Chat GPT and I make up bios and I don't know, I do all these different things. But I got a bio from Kevin, and then I went and looked at his LinkedIn bio as well, or his about. And, you know, it made me, it immediately made me think of the power of, I think David Brooks spoke about this idea of resume virtues or eulogy virtues. So in fairness and in truth, when I asked Kevin for his bio, this is what he gave me. Kevin O'Brien is a husband and dad. He's passionate about his wife and kids and about spreading awareness about St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. He has a retail background with over 35 years of experience leading people to amazing levels of customer service and brings that coaching experience to all that he does. And then I went to his LinkedIn bio, highly motivated, results-oriented professional with extensive experience, comprehensive knowledge, and proven abilities in leadership, operations, change management, and brand building, understands the needs of the business, the importance of donors and team members, excellent leadership, team building, and communication skills to achieve bottom line results, strategic and tactical thinker with a passion for our mission and the individuals and corporate partners who support that mission of finding cures and saving children. Look, there's no doubt that I gravitate towards, I'm magnetized by his eulogy virtues. But the reality is this man shares both of them together. His resume virtues are his eulogy virtues because he does what he loves what he does, and he makes a difference. Mr. Kevin O'Brien, finally, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Joseph. That sounded amazing. I hope I'm guessing you wrote that at some point, because I don't know that I would have said all those things about myself. So I appreciate you updating my LinkedIn profile, and that's a great start to the show. With that, I think we're done. I mean, I appreciate it.
You never have to encourage me with that line, because all I do is I launch straight into
"You are Chuck Norris approved."
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing.
That would have really been the world's shortest show, and people would be thanking us for it. But you're not going to get off this lightly. I'm talking to you, Kevin. I'm talking to everyone watching. Kevin, we had it was funny. Well, first of all, let's talk about what David Brooks talks about. Refers to as eulogy virtues versus resume virtues. Why are they separate? Why do people not? Why do people not actually even think about eulogy virtues and are constantly pumping up and boosting their resume virtues, which then, and I heard this the other day, it's like at a funeral, no one speaks about all your corporate accomplishments, not yours. Nobody speaks about one's corporate accomplishments. People tend to not talk about how many people they managed and how many promotions they had and what their EBITDA was. They talk about eulogy virtues. They talk about being a mother, a father, a child, a son, a daughter, a husband, a human. So what's wrong with the world? Why do we have our priorities backwards?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's an opportunity for us to change the narrative, right? I mean, let's you and I start today. Let's talk about those virtues that we want people to say about us when we're gone. And then let's make sure they say about us while we're still here, right? I think as you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit, I think your mother would want you to be the person you are and were to her, to everybody that you meet, right? Because it's the people in our lives that love us the most. The things that they love about us are the things that are probably the best things about us, and we need to share those more in the corporate landscape.
Do you think, are we capable of actually coming up with our own eulogy virtues, or does that really need to be bestowed upon us or shared with us by somebody else close to us, or sometimes even a stranger?
I think we need to be willing and courageous enough to ask the question of the people in our lives. If you were going to eulogize me today, what would you say about me? And if some of those things that we hear in honesty aren't what we would want them to be, then let's take the time to change it.
So I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to be sneaky. I'm going to be sneaky, and so you can't talk back. I'm going to put you in the green room, and which I've never done before. And I'm going to not eulogize him like in the literal sense, but I'll tell you who Kevin O'Brien is to me, just off the cuff. So there are many executives in the world. There are many muckety mucks. There are many people that keynote. He was the closing keynote. I was the opening keynote. There are many people that are full of what's the word I'm looking for? Full of pretense. That's the word. They're full of pretense. They're full of bravado. They're full of what is perceived to be arrogance. And generally, it's probably fear and insecurity, and something going on inside. But Kevin, I think maybe it's true to say we both sought each other out. We'll tell the story of how we met. But this was someone who could have placated or could have, just been very superficial, very cursory, but he responded in the same passion, the same not even spontaneity, but this idea of this gut reaction, this first say yes, then figure it out later. And honestly, you don't meet many people in the world like this, that actually are just that are drawn. I just came back from a mindfulness retreat, and I'm still struggling with the concept of how do you act and think and live with your heart. Well, Kevin is someone who lives, not lived, lives, thinks, acts with his heart, and that makes him truly exceptional. And of course, you'll find out about all the other wonderful stuff he does and he did. Okay, so now you can come back. It's my attempt to start eulogizing you.
Well, I appreciate that, but I'll immediately throw it back to you and to.
All right, I'm going to put myself in the green room. Go for it.
Yeah, so I think Joseph, when I met him, and we'll probably delve into this story a little more. He was opening a conference and he had a line, and I just loved the line. I didn't know at that point that it was kind of his tagline, but the line was hope, positivity, and optimism in a time of despair. Right, whatever the time of despair happened to be, and I said I just love that line because I think it showed me for what I was going to be talking about later in that same conference. It gave me an opportunity to say, you know what, that's what my little girl Catie, and we're going to talk about her in a moment. That's what she did. She gave us this great example of a time of despair, and she never despaired, right? If despair can be both an adjective and a verb, it was an adjective describing the time that she was in, but it never became the verb that defined how she was living her life. And I think there's a great lesson for me, for sure, and for others as well, that despair can come into your life. It comes into all of our lives, but don't let it become the verb that defines how you live that life. And Joseph, to me, exemplifies that, especially as we went through, and he went through his mother's kind of end of life journey. There could have been despair in that, and it stayed an adjective and never became a verb. And I applaud that in Joseph, and I think that's part of what allowed us to start developing a relationship and a rapport.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad we're both still alive. We will stay on the ridiculous before we get into the sublime, because if you thought that I was going to let you off the hook and not talk about some of the fun facts about you, you were sorely mistaken. And so we went and we really we went into the dark web to find out the sordid truths about you. He seems like a nice guy, but deep down, we found out the real truth. We found out that you grew a foot in a year. What kind of magic plant-based fertilizer are you taking? When did this happen?
So between my junior and senior year in high school, I went from 5'3" to a little over 6'3".
That is a big foot.
It was,
but
it wasn't plant-based for sure. And this is where I'm gonna throw it back at you, and you're not gonna be really happy with this. When I was 5'3" and I was a junior in high school, my mom passed away, and in the year following her death, I grew a foot. So I offer that as a challenge to you, not that you're all of a sudden going to become 7 feet tall in the year after your mom passed, but I will challenge you to find those moments of growth in this year of 2023 after your mom passed away, and find that foot of growth for yourself, because this can be, if you allow it to be, this can be a huge year for you. You've just got to be willing to accept 2023 and the loss that you had and make the most of it. And for me, it was a foot of actual growth. For you, it can be any kind of new growth that you want it to be.
Well, funnily enough, I've actually had it. I've had a foot of growth, but out in this direction as well. So But I'm trying to actually lose that foot of growth. But I do love that. I love the concept of, literal or figurative growth, actually in a time of not despair or tragedy, but mourning. Kevin, why do you think growth can come from literal or figurative, from these moments of actual mourning, of loss? Is there something about loss as opposed to anything else? Losing your job, getting laid off, divorce, moving house, whatever. Pandemic, whatever. What is it about loss that can allow us to grow?
Well, I think that's the key word, is allow, right? I think everyone's going to experience loss. Everyone's going to have whatever, however you define it, right? You're going to experience the loss of time. You're going to experience the loss of a friend, of a loved one, a job, whatever it happens to be. And I think it's attitude more than anything else that defines how that loss impacts us, right? If we make the choice, and it is legitimately a daily, if not hourly choice, to say, yeah, I acknowledge the fact that something's gone from my life. Now, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do with that? And I think if we make the choice, one of my favorite books is Night by Elie Wiesel. And he talks about, in a concentration camp, when everything else is taken away from you, the one thing you still have is your own personal choice to choose the attitude with which you want to go through that day. And I think that is a very powerful gift that is given to each one of us. I don't know that people necessarily take as much of advantage of it as they could. But that willingness and ability to say, all right, here's my circumstances. I acknowledge what they are. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to make it turn into something positive? That's my choice. And it's my attitude that can make that difference.
I think you just answered the question so perfectly, insofar that, and I will paraphrase or frame or reframe, that when you lose someone, there is a void. There is a hole. There is actually a hole in the universe. So, there's the tear in the fabric. There is an aspect of godliness that is gone. The question is, who fills the void? Can you fill the void? How do you fill the void? How do you step into that void and fill it with love and kindness and memories and generosity and good deeds? And sometimes the shoes are unbelievably large and deep to fill, but fill it you must. And I think perhaps that's where growth comes from. In many respects, there is a dot here, and the dot is you don't grow during times of serenity and times when there are no external pains, pressures, good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah, and I think, and it's okay to say that there's a hole in my life because in this case, this person is no longer here. My gosh, if didn't that person make an impact on your life when they came into your life or when you came into theirs? Well, if they did, then it makes all the sense in the world that when they're absent from your life or they've been taken away from your life, that would leave a gap, right? And you're right. How you choose to fill it is where the growth comes from. And I applaud you for filling the gap in your life of Natalie with more opportunities and more work and more passion, and keep doing that, because somewhere she is saying to you, yes, Joseph, I'm proud of you for doing that.
I think what she's saying to me right now is, Joseph, the QR code is not going to work against such a loud background, you moron. What did I teach you about QR codes? And so I inserted the QR code up there, and I was like, wait a second, we're going to need to break some rules here and go with a few backgrounds that we don't normally use. But I know we can try this one. Oh, there we go. There we go. We can use this one. And funnily enough, the one that I actually just had in the background was this beautiful one with flowers. This QR code, I'm going to put it up multiple times during this this interview, this chat. It's not an interview. This hangout between two old friends who are neither old but are friends. And if you want to donate to St. Jude, all you have to do is scan the QR code above. You know, Kevin, my sister just lost her business partner from the C word. You know, I mean, I hate to even. I remember, I don't know if it was a Monty Python line or a Benny Hill line, but the line is, "I don't discriminate. I hate everyone equally." And certainly, when it comes to cancer, there is no discrimination. It acts indiscriminately and very democratically and very unemotionally. But we have a choice, and if we choose to support St. Jude, please scan that QR code, and I will put it up multiple times during the next 45 minutes or so. But Kevin, I have one more little tidbit about your interesting past. And that relates to this jar, my friend. There you are in the jar. Who knew your kids gave you a jar filled with things we love about Dad? And the number one slip was, he tells us historical facts with such passion and confidence that we believe him, even though they are not true. So, Kevin, I would like you to tell me a historical fact with such passion and confidence that I'm going to believe you, even though it's not true.
So I went to the movie Oppenheimer last night, and I just, it was a great movie. But one of the things that I knew from reading about Oppenheimer was that it turns out that he was actually not in charge of the project. There was a gentleman by the name of Billy Smith who was actually in charge of the entire Manhattan Project. And you won't see that anywhere in the movie or in most of the books. But it's true that actually Billy Smith was the director of the Manhattan Project, not Dr. Oppenheimer.
I completely believe that. Are you telling me seriously that that's not true?
It's not.
Unbelievable. Now, had you had that rehearsed? Did you have that one kind of, or did you like literally make it up on the spot?
You put me on the spot, and that's what I came up with.
Well, that is a talent. You know, To Tell the Truth is actually a game show. I think if the producers are watching, you need to have Mr. Kevin O'Brien. You need to be the head judge. You can sniff out a mile away. Well, okay, so we've done the ridiculous. It's time to get into the sublime. And I will tell you, before we hear about Catie and Catie's story, and you know, Kevin, I don't know how you came into my life. I mean, I do know the specifics, but one of the things that happened was you heard me, you asked me, you've already told that part of the story. And you asked if you could use that line, right? HPO, hope, positivity, and optimism in a time of despair. After you spoke, I came up to you and I said, I need you to write the foreword for my book. Now, we won't go into the specifics and the and the actual procrastination, which I now know was related to and connected back to my mom. You know, I couldn't finish the book while she was alive because her legacy needed to be cemented into this book. But this book has become such a special part of my life. Having you write the foreword is absolutely critical and pivotal. But there's an interesting part of the story, which is that you just didn't leave me alone. You wouldn't let me go. I couldn't finish the book, and just every few weeks, every month or two, you would call me, you would check in with me, you would ask me how my mom was while she was still alive. And then when she passed away, you continued to follow up on me, on my mom, on the book. And at one point, I started avoiding your calls, and you turned around and you suspected that maybe I was avoiding your calls until this gentleman actually stepped in. Now, Kevin, do you know who this gentleman is? What is this gentleman's name?
I'm going to guess that's Jimmy Pepper.
That is Jimmy Pepper, according to Midjourney's AI bot. I said, who is Jimmy Pepper? This apparently is Jimmy Pepper. Tell people the story of Jimmy Pepper.
So, Joseph, I was suspecting that you were actually ducking me, but I wasn't going to give up. For anybody who knows me, especially if I'm trying to advocate or help the kids at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, I am overly persistent, and so I actually called Joseph from a phone I hadn't used previously, so that he couldn't ghost me. And apparently on Joseph's phone, my phone came up as Jimmy Pepper. And so he answered, which he then regretted because he heard my voice. And he then tried to make it out that he hadn't been ducking me. And he was like, "Oh, no. I've been
blatantly lied.
I've been waiting for your call." So it just worked out well. I'm guessing that was Catie's intervention and maybe your mom's intervention a little bit to put a name on your phone, so that you'd be willing to pick it up so we could continue the conversation and get you off the dime and get you finished.
And here we are. It is, we are pre-recording in August of 2023, November 1st in Cape Town, South Africa. I will be keynoting an event relating to a club that my mom was chair, and she was a steering stalwart in terms of this club in particular, the 100 Club. They did a lot for women-run businesses, for women-owned businesses, for women, up-and-coming women in business, for women of color, women that did not have the privilege that certainly so many members of the committee had. And now they're going to honor her. They've asked me to keynote. I'm going to be keynoting on the book Forever Change. The book is still nowhere close to completion. But you know what? Sometimes you just gotta do it. And so November 1st, let's put it this way. If I'm nowhere near to where I need to be, this interview never sees the light of day. I'll be so embarrassed. It will be ready.
Well,
all right.
I can go buy another phone and dial you from a different phone again.
I'm just going to actually I'm going to move to like a ranch and never take any phone calls again. There is life is a roller coaster. There are highs and lows, and in a way, personal tragedy has brought us together in the most sublime and beautiful way. We're going to spend the rest of our time talking about Catie. And what I'm going to do is, for the most part, I'm going to be watching in the background and being your producer. But Kevin, I would love for you to tell the world about Catie, tell her story. I'll do my best to show a few images along the way, and then I'll come back. So
well, if you start with the picture of the 5 kids, I think that's probably a great way to kind of introduce. Yeah, so that's a picture of Jason Taylor from the NFL and 5 actual patients from St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And there's a few things I love about this picture. One is that about 20 seconds before they actually snapped this as a still shot before they ran the commercial, those kids were hanging on Jason and were using him like a jungle gym. And it's one of the greatest parts about St. Jude, and we'll talk about St. Jude, pretty extensively here in the next 20 minutes or so. But those are kids, and they were being kids, and that's these are kids that had sickle cell disease, they had medulloblastoma, they had acute lymphoblastic leukemia. They were some of the sickest kids in the world, but in that moment, there was this pure moment of joy where they were still able to be kids. And just to give you kind of an idea, the pediatric cancer landscape, first in the United States and then globally, we'll talk about for a minute. In the United States, when St. Jude Children's Research Hospital opened its doors a little over 60 years ago, pediatric cancer was a death sentence. And that's just the reality. As it turned out, at that time, if you look at the 5 kids in this picture, 4 out of 5 of the kids that were diagnosed with pediatric cancer back when the hospital opened its doors, 4 out of those 5 kids would die. That was just the reality. In fact, when Dr. Donald Pinkel, who was the first medical director at St. Jude, when he was an up and coming doctor at the first hospital he served at, as he was walking and doing rounds with his mentor, he started to make a left and go down a hallway, and his mentor stopped him and said, don't go down there. And he said, well, aren't there patients down there? And they said, well, yeah, there's patients down there, but those are all kids that have leukemia. And there's nothing we can do for them anyway, so don't go down there. It'll just break your heart. And he remembered that. And when Danny Thomas, who was the founder of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, when Danny approached him to be the medical director, he remembered that, don't go down there because there's nothing we can do for those kids. And he said, that can't be true. There can't be nothing we can do. And he had that passion to say, Danny gave him the opportunity to say, look, there is something we can do. And the something we can do has now evolved to the point where today in the United States, if you look at that same picture of every 5 kids that are diagnosed with pediatric cancer, 4 out of those 5 kids will now survive. And that's amazing progress. But it's unfortunately worldwide. So I love numbers. I know some people don't, but here's a number that I think will resonate and always seems like huge to me. 400,000 kids in the world this year will contract some form of pediatric cancer. 400,000 kids. And the amazing thing and really the horrifying thing to me is that more than half of those kids will die without their parents or themselves ever knowing why, because they won't even be diagnosed, but they'll have died from cancer. And worldwide, even though we're at 80% plus from a survival rate standpoint in the United States, worldwide, we're still back at 20%. And St. Jude Children's Research Hospital has said, you know what, that kind of inequity just isn't right. We need to do more worldwide to make sure that kids everywhere have a chance to survive. And I'll jump to a minute and get to Catie, but please, Joseph, remember that we need to go back and talk a little bit more about Danny Thomas and why the hospital, became what it is. But let's focus on Catie for just a minute. So, we said 4 out of 5 of the kids in that picture are going to survive. And in that particular picture, the kid that didn't survive was Catie. And if we can throw a picture of just, there she is. That's my little girl. I was blessed to be her dad. I am blessed to be her dad. She was 7 years old when she was diagnosed with pediatric cancer. And she had surgery to remove a tumor from the base of her spine. And when we did the biopsy on that tumor, it turned out that it was a very rare form of pediatric cancer called atypical teratoid rhabdoid tumor, which doesn't really mean anything other than the fact that at the time that Catie was diagnosed in 2008, no child had ever been cured of an ATRT. And so when we went into kind of treatment, we knew we were up against it. And so we talked to our local doctors. We talked to the doctors at the local pediatric hospital, and kind of everybody said the same thing. Look, this is really rare. This is really bad. You need to go where Catie's got her best chance. And the best chance was to go down to St. Jude. And there's this beautiful moment when my wife, Christine, and Catie hop on a flight and they head to Memphis, Tennessee, where the hospital is. And they arrive at the front doors of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And a nurse walks out the front door. And as Catie and Christine are walking up the path to the doors, she walks out that front door and she says, "Hey, are you Catie?" And Catie says, "Yes." Again, 7 years old. And she says, "Will you come with me?" And they take her into a room and they paint her nails and make her feel like a princess. While at the same time, they take my wife into another room and they say, "Okay, here's your keys to a 2-bedroom apartment. And here's the meal card for this week. We'll give you another one next week. And don't worry about a thing. We'll take care of everything." And I can remember as they were heading to the airport, I handed Christine a brand new credit card. And I said, put everything on this. And when we hit the credit limit, we'll figure something else out. And when she called me that night, she said, "You know what? We don't need the credit card." I said, "What do you mean we don't need the credit card?" And she said, "They take care of everything." And when Joseph puts the QR code back up, as we talk more about St. Jude, if you feel compelled to scan that QR code, the reason that St. Jude can say you'll never get a bill from us for treatment, travel, housing, or food is because people that hear the story of St. Jude and hear the story of Catie and other patients, they open their hearts and they say, you know what, we're willing to support something that's that amazing. And as a result, no child for over 60 years has ever received a bill from St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So back to Catie for a minute, and we'll get to how Catie kind of became part of the Kevin meets Joseph story. Catie, unfortunately, through 31 rounds of radiation and a couple of rounds of stem cell salvage and chemotherapy, Catie's tumor blew back through all of that. And so even though we had hoped that she'd be the first kid to beat an ATRT tumor, she unfortunately wasn't. She succumbed to her cancer, and she passed away less than 8 months from the day that she was diagnosed. And that's unfortunate and it's sad. But here's the amazing thing. I was down at St. Jude just a couple of weeks ago, and I heard just an amazingly hopeful and beautiful stat that now a kid like Catie, who's diagnosed with an ATRT, that's Catie's age and kind of had the same tumor that she had, St. Jude is now able to cure over 60% of those kids that have that tumor. And that's only 14 years removed from when Catie passed away. So that kind of progress still continues to be made. And it's just an amazing, amazing place. And I'll stop talking there. And Joseph, you kind of kick me off and see if there's something else that we want to talk about.
You tell the story. You told the story. I've told. It's interesting. I've maybe told the story dozens of times, dozens and dozens of times, where every morning she would wake up, and I probably broken telephone. I tell her this is how I tell the story. And she'd say, every morning she'd say, Dad, is today the day I'm going to die? And you'd say to her, not today, Catie. And then she'd say, great, let's go to Six Flags, or then let's do this. And you would do something with her every day. I tell that all the time. I haven't thought it through. I've never allowed it to actually go deeper than just this idea of live every day like it's your only day, like it's your last day, like it's your best day. But it's very profound. And I wonder if you want to touch on that and why, and the importance of maybe the deeper part of it that I haven't quite been able to put my hands around yet.
Yeah, and I'll add one more adjective. Maybe treat it like it's your first day, right? The first day of today. I mean, today's the day. She legitimately understood, and we had, from the day we found out the tumor was back until the day she died, it was 61 days, and she legitimately made the most of those 61 days, but not because she thought about 61 days, but because she thought about one day. She thought about today. And she would actually, just like you told it, she would say, Mom, Dad, is today the day I'm going to die? And we didn't know for sure, but we were pretty sure, no, it doesn't look like today's the day. And it was kind of that, that loose. It was, no, I don't think so. And then it was immediately, okay, then what are we going to do? And it was, and it wasn't always something amazing, like let's go to Six Flags, or let's go to, it was, sometimes it was, I'd really like to have mashed potatoes today. So whatever today looks like to you, where you can either make it a better day for someone else, or if you're in the space where you need to make sure you make it a better day for you, then do it. Don't miss today's opportunity, because that's legitimately what it is a gift and an opportunity. And what are you going to do with it? My father, who was one of the most amazing individuals I've ever met, and he wasn't He wasn't a, he didn't have a huge title or anything else. I mean, the greatest title he ever had, in my estimation, was dad. And for the kids who were blessed to have him as a grandfather, he was Poppy. And I can remember Catie calling my father on the phone when we found out that the tumor was back. And she said, Poppy, I don't think I'm going to make it to my 8th birthday, but it looks like I'm still going to be around for your 80th. Can we come down and celebrate our birthdays together? And just that switch of a mentality to be able to say, you know what, let's find a reason to celebrate today. Not because it's a day on a calendar that we're looking for, like a birthday or an anniversary, but it's today. It's August 8th. Why not celebrate August 8th? And my father, who had this kind of homespun wisdom, he would say, you know what, if at the end of the day, as your head hits the pillow, you can say that you did something to take care of someone else, then call it a win. And if you happen to wake up tomorrow morning, try it all over again, and make sure when your head hits the pillow that you've done something for someone else. And Catie exemplified that. I mean, she, at 7 years old, and here's to me, the best part of Catie's life, short as it was, is that she said, you know what? She took my wife. I am still to this day, I am upset, heartbroken that I wasn't there for this conversation, but she took my wife into what was the kind of the memorial garden at St. Jude. And it's where Danny Thomas and his wife Rosemary are actually buried, in this garden. And it's a beautiful place of repose and silence and meditation. And she loved it there. And she took my wife and said, you know what, Mom, I want to talk about my legacy. Now, I'm 58 years old, and I don't think I've necessarily put my legacy together, but she was 7 and she wanted to talk about her legacy. And she said, I know St. Jude wasn't able to cure me, but I want to be able to make sure that St. Jude can cure the next kid. And we had no clue what she meant by the next kid. Was it the next kid that had an ATRT tumor like her? Was it the next kid? And she, we've come to understand that what she really meant was however you define the next kid, right? So, and she said, I want you to do all you can to support St. Jude so that next kid makes it. And so what is, how do we define next kid? If anybody that's listening to our conversation today, if you want to do anything, if you want to put a mindset to, supporting or talking about or being an advocate for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, it's this concept of next kid that I'd really love for you to hang on to. And it's, while we're talking, whenever you happen to be watching this broadcast, there's a kid just like Catie who's walking up to the doors of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And there's someone there, like a Crystal, who welcomed Catie and Christine. There's going to be someone there who's welcoming that child. And think about what that moment is like. Think about the 2 weeks or the 3 weeks before that moment, when a kid hasn't been sleeping or is having pain or whatever's happening in their lives, that they know something's not right. And for that parent, they know that something's wrong with their child, and they've gone to doctors and whatever else. And finally, somebody walks into them and says, your child has cancer, or you have cancer. And for a kid, that's momentous. For a parent, I'll tell you, it's heartbreaking. And yet when they arrive at those doors to that hospital, somebody is, and this is where we aligned on this line, someone is offering them hope in a moment of despair, in what's been weeks of despair in many cases. And that hope for that child is critical. So that's one next kid, right? And maybe there's a next kid who never will see St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, that because of the work that happens at St. Jude, they're in Podunk, Iowa, or they're in California, or they're in New York, and they go to their local children's hospital, and they're able to receive treatment that was originally created at St. Jude. And they'll never even know about St. Jude, but St. Jude's supporting that journey as well. They're taking care of that next kid. Or maybe there's a kid on the other side of the world where, again, survival rates are still down at 20%, but because of what St. Jude is doing, those children have a chance at another life. That next kid gets taken care of. Or maybe, hopefully, at some point in the future, there's a next kid who will never even be diagnosed with sickle cell or cancer because we've come up with a cure, right? Those are all the next kids that Catie would tell you to think about.
I mean, I love it, and I want to. I know you want to. I know there are a few things you still want to talk about. I want you to talk about it, but I also want to tell you that one of the things I love doing on the show is telling people what their next book is going to be called, and and I mean, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more profound than certainly it is frivolous, but there is something there with respect to the idea of the next kid. The next kid. It could be called that. It certainly speaks to legacy. What we do on this planet, what we do in this short time we have here, is to be able to take the ball, run with it, and then pass it on. Take the baton, run with it, and pass it on. That, by definition, is legacy, is the ability to keep it going and recognize, well, the cure for cancer may not have come during our lifetimes, but it will come. And we did everything that we could. But there's probably, here's actually what I would call your book. I would call it Don't Go Down There. It's a very powerful, powerful quote. Or go down there, you know. But this idea of don't go down there, in fact, changing, rewiring the brain to actually, you know, identify all of these moments of don't go there or don't go down there, and you know what, go down there, figure it out. You know, it's hard, it's painful, it's gut wrenching, but when you go down there, that is where hope lives. It may be buried, it may be deep and dark down that corridor, but when you find it, it creates a light unlike any you've ever seen. These are the two little sound bites that just resonated with me. I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, thank you for that. And I think so. Your point about, you know, do what you can with the days that you have. I think Catie would sum up her legacy with how do I live each day that I have left was part of it. And then she was willing to take the next step, which was how do I live beyond the days that I have left? And I think she lives beyond the days that she had on this earth because people like you are willing to listen and give a voice to who she still is, advocating for that next kid.
Well, Kevin, this is the rescheduled. This is the thrice or twice rescheduled pre-recording that happens to have been pre-recorded on August 8th. Now we understand 8/8, the number 8, why it had to be today, because of Catie's 8th birthday. I would love for you to tell us the story, speaking of legacy, about Catie's birthday and her wish on her 8th birthday.
So, you know, Catie kind of gave this legacy talk, and then she said, you know what? She got really specific. She said, you know, I'm not going to be here for my 8th birthday, but I love St. Jude, and I want you and Mom to pay for everything at St. Jude on my 8th birthday. And we're like, what do you mean? She said, well, I want you to pay for all the treatment for all the kids and all the research that happens there. And I want you to pay for the electricity to turn the lights on. And I want you to pay for, I need you to pay for Ron the painter. And we're like, what? And she's like, yeah, you know, Ron. And there's a, I'm sure there's still someone who does this. At the time when Catie was at St. Jude, his name was Ron, and he went around and he would change light bulbs, but he also had a cart with a number of different little buckets of paint on it. And the walls and the hallways of St. Jude are so vibrant and colorful, and they tell the story of the seasons as you walk through the hallways. And it just doesn't look like a hospital. It looks like a place where a kid would want to be. And it was Ron's job to go around and he would touch up the paint on all the beautiful colored murals so that every next kid that walked through the hospital and every mom or dad who was with them would see this bright, beautiful thing. And it was his job to make sure that everything stayed fresh and beautiful. She said, I want you to make sure that you pay for Ron's salary. And so partnering with St. Jude and with some others, we essentially went out and we said, we asked, will you help us make Catie's wish come true, that she pays for everything at the hospital? And we learned at that time that it cost in 2008 about $1.4 million a day to run the hospital and the treatment facilities and the research and all of that. Now it's north of $2.5 million a day to run the hospital. But the generosity of thousands made it possible that on her birthday, she was able to pay for all the operating expenses at St. Jude on her 8th birthday.
Catie would be upset with me if I didn't give her at least one air horn. So, I've been very liberal handing out air horns in the past, but Catie deserves a double air horn, which I don't think I've ever given out before. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful story.
It reminds me, if you think of the origin story of St. Jude, right? It's for those that don't know, Danny Thomas, who was a struggling entertainer, early in his career, he was down to his last, depending on whose story you hear, his last $6, his last $7. And like many of us, he's in a church praying, right? He was amazed. He was willing to go to a place and say, I don't have all the answers and I need help. And for his faith, he ended up in front of a statue of St. Jude Thaddeus, who in the Catholic tradition is the patron saint of hopeless causes. And at that point, his career was, in his mind, a hopeless cause. And so he took those last dollars out of his pocket and he put it in a collection plate. And he said to the statue, I need your help. If you help me find my way in life, I will build you a shrine. And as the story goes, that next day he gets a call and he becomes a singing toothbrush on a radio show. And his career kind of catapults from there and takes off. And he becomes a worldwide entertainer, movie star, television star. And unlike many of us, and I know I've put myself in this category, he remembered that promise. He remembered that he had made that prayer. And even though things had gone well for him, he remembered the other side of it, which was, I'll do something for you if you help me with my career. And so he remembers this promise that he said, I would build you a shrine. And when he went to talk to people about building shrines, they said, look, well, we don't really need a shrine. We've got plenty of shrines. What we need is a children's hospital. And we need a hospital where kids can go and they can be healed of what heretofore has been catastrophic, uncurable diseases. And so he decides to build this hospital. He gets together with a number of other first-generation immigrants to this country. And they essentially say, you know what, this country's been very, very generous with us. And it's time for us to give something back. And what a beautiful thought, right? That we actually should give something back to the world that we live in. And out of that came St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And he said, look, we're going to treat all kids, regardless of race, creed, or ability to pay. And we're going to stick the hospital in a segregated city, Memphis, Tennessee. And that's where we're going to make a stand. So it became the first integrated hospital in the South. And it, to this day, no child has ever paid, no child has ever received a bill from St. Jude. No child has ever been denied treatment because of race, creed, or ability to pay. And Catie loved St. Jude, and I probably love it just as much as she ever did. But I'll tell you what, I now get to work for St. Jude, and I couldn't be more proud. The more I find out about and the more I learned about St. Jude, the more proud I am to support and represent, when I'm able to, the hospital that Catie loves so much.
I love the story, and I identify because I feel like the ultimate hopeless cause. So can you show me where the statue is? I'd like to pray to the statue too, so that I can stop being a hopeless cause. But it's such a beautiful story. I never knew that. So Jude, the patron saint of hopeless causes, can there be anything more hopeless, a hopeless cause, than trying to defeat the C word, cancer? And the answer, of course, is, just do it. Just figure it out. Just launch into it. I mean, it's everything that we discussed today. Sometimes the fire, ready, aim approach. Put yourself out there. Never give up. Never let your head drop. And if it does, know that you have people to your left and your right that will be there for you. This is, we get into patron saints, we get into philosophers. I always try and come up with a quote, and we have two philosophers, actually, two profound people that will give us our quotes for today. We're going to start off with the lesser known and the lesser famous of the two. This is the quote: "You have to be willing to give up the life you planned and instead greet the life that is waiting for you." And this is the lesser known philosopher, which is Joseph Campbell. The next two I'll get into, but first of all, any thoughts or comments on what this quote means and how it connects with you, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think I for sure would agree with that. Catie absolutely would agree with that, right? I mean, I'm sure she had plans even at 7 years old, right? I mean, I'm sure she looked forward. There was this beautiful moment. We were sitting in a restaurant, and she was, at that point, we had found out the tumor was back, and we're sitting in a restaurant, and a song comes on, and she starts crying. And Catie, as you saw in all the pictures that Joseph put up, she always had a beautiful smile on her face. And so when that smile disappeared, it was like this moment of, what the heck is going on? And she looked at Christine and she said, "I just realized I'm never going to get to dance with Daddy at my wedding." And it was this moment of like, oh my God. I mean, despair, right? When you talk about, that is a moment of despair right there for her, for us. And yet within 10 seconds, we all had that Catie thought of, make today the day that you have and celebrate it. And we all kind of picked her up and started dancing around the restaurant to that song, because today's the opportunity for you to dance. Don't wait for 5 years from now to dance or to do whatever it is that will give you joy. Today's the day you have. And that's the legacy that she leaves behind, is, if this isn't the life that you planned, it's the life that you have. Live it. Do the best you can with it.
Do you remember the song that was playing?
It was called "I Loved Her First."
Wow, I'm going to have to go and now seek out that song. It might have to become the official new song of Joseph Jaffe. Is still not famous, but I promised you a second philosopher, a little bit significantly better known than Joseph Campbell, who was a hack apparently. But the second philosopher was Catie, and two of her most famous quotes are, "Do everything you can to make the journey better for the next family." I think we touched on that beautiful story, the next kid. People will help. You just need to ask them. Even more profound than the previous one. I guess people sometimes are afraid to ask for help. People are afraid that people will say no. And here we have Catie saying, people will help. There are good people out there. People will help you. You just need to ask them. What are your thoughts on this, Kev?
And there's vulnerability in that, right? Because there's a possibility that you may ask and someone may say no, but that doesn't mean stop asking, right? How many times did I call you and bug you and persist, and eventually, even though I had to change my name to Jimmy Pepper, you picked up the phone, right? So There's a lesson in there of persistence. There's a lesson in there of vulnerability. And then if you're the person on the other end of that, if someone's asking you for help, and what an opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. Take the call, help the people that are willing to ask you for your help, and recognize their vulnerability in that. So really it's the two sides of that, right? Be willing to ask for help, and then be willing to help when someone asks you.
I just want to say, in my defense, I was planning on eventually answering you, but I was, yeah, and look, I mean, there's embarrassment, there's humiliation, there's shame, there is, but you know what? It was very powerful when finally, even though I lied to you and figured, and I was convinced that you knew I was lying, but I was still going to admit to it and fess up. You know, these are the things that happen not to you, but for you. Catie was able to achieve in 7 and change very short years more than what some people strive or struggle their entire lives to be able to achieve. I think if given the choice, I'm sure we'd both prefer to be with us right now without any of that achievement. But, you know, it's a life of hypotheticals. What is real and what is super real is the fact that she is a remarkable young lady. And, you know, when I ask someone, what do you want to talk about? And the response I get is as simple as being Catie's dad. Please, if you're watching this, take this away with you. If somebody says, what were your achievements in life? Instead of the EBITDA and the acquisitions and all of the status and ego-driven achievements, how about saying being insert your children's father or mother? How about insert your spouse's name? How about being your parents' son or daughter? I certainly am proud of being Natalie's son. I'm also proud of being your friend, and truly blessed to know you. And I will tell you, when that book finally does come out, the reviews will without question say the foreword was exceptional. The rest of the book, not so much, but it's okay. I can live with it.
Well, I thank you for all of that, and I think, you know, we started this conversation talking about, you know, resumes versus eulogies. And I think Catie, she lived her eulogy. The things that we said about her at her eulogy, and I had to give it. And I'll put a plug in for my wife here for just a second. We actually had 2 memorial services for Catie. And when I got done with the first memorial service, my wife said to me, well, what are you going to say tomorrow at tomorrow's eulogy service for the other group of people that we're going to be with? I said, well, I was going to use the same one. She said, no, you need to change it. So I actually had to write 2, but she lived her eulogy virtues, not just her resume virtues. And I think in many ways, you do that as well. And I think you know, Joseph, I'm going to pick you up just a little bit here. I think your mom is proud of you, the person that you are still becoming. And I think Natalie would say, keep going, don't give up, make today the best day it can be. And I think there's a lesson for all of us in that. Today's the day we have. Let's see what we can do with it.
Well, I think I just need to correct you just with one tiny bit. She would say, don't give up, because Chuck Norris is going to be looking for you.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
And we will be back soon if Chuck Norris hasn't found us yet.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or 2. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
and despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.